I got it myself.
Hey, Porter, you need help with that?
No, I can do it myself. Okay, how do I do this?
Hey, Len, do you need help?
No, I can do it myself. Can I go to help here?
Well, good morning and happy Mother's Day to all you mothers and mother figures celebrating today. Now, behind me, I'm not sure if you guys can see or not, but our environmental projection this morning is just a sampling of all the mothers that we have here in the church. Just a way for us to honor you and recognize your importance, not only in the lives of the people that you're part, the families that you're a part of, but your importance here in the life of the church as well. One of the questions I always get on Mother's Day is, why do you preach on Mother's Day, Michelle? You're a mother, shouldn't you get the day off? But Mother's Day is actually one of my favorite days of the year to get to preach because it's the way that I can honor those women who have poured into me over the years, and it's because of them that I'm able to be here this morning. Now, this morning is also special to me because I am also a mom. I have two boys. Wolf is 18 and Felix is 9. And you know, I remember that day so many years ago when Wolf was born. And when they handed him to me and placed him in my arms for the first time. He was so tiny. He weighed 6 pounds, 6 ounces, but he was 22 inches long. So he was this skinny, long baby. And I remember as they placed him in my arms, just thinking about how much this little guy was going to need me, how much he would need me to love him unconditionally, but at the same time, to also be there to help him grow into the man that God created him to be. And that's what I set forth to do, all on my own. For weeks upon end, I tended to his every need. I wouldn't let anybody help me, not even Dad. I made sure I covered all the basics. He was fed, he was clothed, diapers got changed. And then I did all the fun stuff, like making him laugh and teaching him, the important things like how to make helicopter noises with your mouth, grunt when Dad walked in the room, and just make funny faces. I devoted my entire world 24/7 to taking care of this little guy, to making sure he had everything he needed, to helping him. I poured everything I had into him, every ounce of energy. And then Wolf said his first word, Dada. Seriously, his first word was Dad. But then he said his second word, Papa. And I was like, what the heck? I get that Daddy is really important, and Papa was the coolest guy ever, but they weren't the ones doing the work. I was. I was the one with bags under her eyes the size of rucksacks from all the sleepless nights. I was the one who put on 100 pounds during the pregnancy. I was the one tending to every single one of his needs. And yet Wolf says, Dada and Papa first. It was several years later that I would learn a very important lesson. Wolf and I were at the park near our house with Shane's cousin Stacy and her little boy Grant. Now, Wolf was just under 2 years old and absolutely loved when he got to spend time with his older cousin. They were playing in the sand by the swings, and Wolf somehow fell, and he stood up and toddled over to where Stacy and I were, covered in dirt and tears running down his eyes. And when he got to where we were, he put his arms out and went to Stacy. And in that moment, I felt my heart drop, and I felt it fill up at the same time. You see, my heart dropped because Wolf went to Stacy for comfort. It wasn't me he wanted. But at the same time, my heart was so very full because Wolf knew where to go for help. He knew who was a safe place for him in a time of need. In that moment, I realized that if I was going to be the best mom possible for Wolf, then I was going to have to let others step in and help. And better yet, I was going to have to ask for that help. Help. It's a word a lot of us struggle with. Let me know right now in the comments what comes to your mind when you hear that word. Is it something you see as a positive or a negative? And does that answer change when you're the one in need of the help? You see, help is something we all have a hard time asking for. We have an even harder time accepting it. And it seems like the moment we're able to utter the words, all by myself, we're on this manic mission to show the world that we are completely self-sufficient. Now, over the past few months during this pandemic, help has been something that we have been able to give readily. As the church, we asked your help to provide gift cards and funds for those in need. And you guys, you stepped up and you helped. When we asked you guys to provide cereal for our mission partner, the Lifehouse, you guys filled that church entranceway with more than 500 boxes of cereal. And when we began making calls, checking on you, asking what you needed, you stepped in for friends and family members, letting us know when they could use some extra prayers and some extra help. And again, when we pushed, asking what we could do for you specifically, the answers changed. In fact, a lot of the times, we just got silence. You see, it's easy to offer help. It's easy to jump in and serve one another. But to be the one who needs help, well, that's uncomfortable. We don't like to be the ones who need help. For many of us, it's a sign of weakness that we just don't want to show. After all, we can do it all by ourselves, right? But really, can we? And better yet, should we? The answer to that is no. You see, it wasn't meant to be this way. Back when this pandemic started, we talked about how we were created to be in community, how we were made to live and breathe and do life with others. And when we ask for help, we recognize that we are truly God's creation. Because in Genesis chapter 2, when God created Eve, he didn't just say Adam needed a companion. He said this, "It's not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." God said, "I will make a helper," not a companion. And there's that word again, help. God said that his own creation wasn't complete until he had built in a way for people to give and receive help. But our pride, it gets in the way. Our need for independence overshadows what has been God's design for us, that design to both need help and give help to each other. We have to understand our need for help. It's not shameful, nor is it a sign of failure. It's simply how we were designed. God built into us a need for help from the very beginning. In Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 10, we read, "Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up." When parents stand on this stage during their child's baptism, we ask them the following question. Will you nurture this child in Christ's holy church, that by your teaching and example, they may be guided to accept God's grace for themselves? And in turn, you all, as a church family, make this promise. With God's help, we will speak and act like Jesus Christ. We will surround these persons with a community of love and forgiveness so that they may grow in their faith and be devoted in their service to God and others. You see, as parents on their baptism day, we make a promise to lead our kids by example. And part of that example is allowing them to see us need help. Allowing them to see that we need to lean upon other people. People just like this church family who make a promise before God to surround the members of this church with love and help. Why do we do this? Because two is truly better than one. You see, Together, by partnering with parents and walking alongside them, we're able to do so much more for these kids than we can do apart. We can share in each other's burdens and likewise the joys. But here's the deal. In order to work together, to be able to pick each other up, we're going to have to be willing to ask for help. You see, one of the biggest defects in life is the inability to ask for help. Now, that's nothing new. People have had a problem asking for help since the beginning, and we've all dealt with it. Today, we're going to take a look at Exodus chapter 18. And yes, we just went from Ecclesiastes back to Exodus. Today's sermon's brought to you by the letter E. But we're going to take a look at the story of Moses and Jethro. Now, Jethro is Moses' father-in-law, and Moses has just accomplished the feat of a lifetime. He's gone at God's command into Egypt, and with God's help and guidance, he has freed his people. Moses is an amazing man. If you've ever read anything or heard anything about Moses, you know this is true. Through him, miracles have been accomplished. He's able to speak with God face to face. And to this day, he sits as a shining example of a godly man. Moses is the leader of hundreds of thousands of people. And as they journey through their wilderness on their way to the promised land, he becomes their go-to guy. He serves as their chief government officer and their chief religious leader. He is it. He's the one they go to for everything. And at this point, life has gotten pretty mundane and ordinary. The people are just trying to figure out how to navigate being with one another while being in this period of wilderness. They're trying to learn how to cope with one another. And when Jethro arrives on the scene, he notices that Moses is doing everything by himself. And when I say everything, I mean everything. All day long, he sits and he hears the people's complaints with one another, and he tries his best to help, case after case after case. Now, Jethro sees what's going on. He sees the people lined up to talk to Moses, and he sees Moses spending hour upon hour upon hour doing this, and he decides to confront Moses. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he asked, "What are you really accomplishing here? Why are you trying to do all this alone while everyone stands around you from morning to evening?" Now, Jethro's question for Moses had nothing to do with Moses' ability. Obviously, he was a good leader and servant. The people would not have been led out of Egypt otherwise. But what Moses was trying to accomplish here was simply too big of a job. There were too many people, and there was only one Moses. The passage continues. "This is not good," Moses' father-in-law exclaimed. "You're going to wear yourself out, and the people too. This job is too heavy a burden for you to handle all by yourself." Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Taking on too much, allowing our independence to become a burden, rather something to celebrate. It's something we all do. We take on task after task after task and juggle so many hats that instead of helping the people we love, we're actually hindering them. You see, Moses needed help. And in an act of love, Jethro encourages him to find people to help him. Not because he didn't have faith in Moses, but he knew if Moses didn't get help, there were going to be some harsh consequences. And that's what happens when we take on too much. Instead of juggling all these balls in the air, we end up dropping them. They will help you carry the load, making the task easier for you. If you follow this advice, and if God commands you to do so, then you'll be able to endure the pressures, and all these people will go home in peace. You know, little baby Wolfie is no longer a baby. He's 18 years old now. And in a few months, I am going to drive him to Dallas, Texas, unpack his belongings in a dorm at Southern Methodist University. and then I'll get on a plane and I'll come home all by myself. And while this will be one of the hardest things I've ever done as a mother, I'll be able to do it because I've had help. You see, throughout his life, there have been countless people who have helped in raising my son. People just like those Jethro spoke of to Moses. People who have been there to carry the load and make the task easier for Shane and I. You know, as a new mom, I wanted to do it all by myself. I wanted to be the one that tended to his every need. And to be honest with you, I tried. I wore myself out trying. And quite frankly, I was much like Moses, on the brink of burnout and doing more harm to the ones I loved than good. Because doing it on my own just was not feasible. And it's not how God designed it to be either. You see, if you look at our roles as parents, they're actually roles as helpers. God entrusted each of us to help him in raising these kids. He entrusted us to not only help him, but find others to share in the task, to share in the joys, and to share in the burdens. He gave us these kids to help, with the help of family, friends, and ultimately the church. Accepting that we're here to help and be helped is an act of humility, honor, and one of obedience to our Father. When Jethro confronts Moses and tells him, hey, Moses, you need help, Moses could have argued with him. He could have said, nope, I'm good. I've got all this handled. But he didn't. Moses doesn't argue. In fact, Moses welcomes Jethro's help in finding others to take on some of the task. Had Moses persisted in what he was doing, the people never would have progressed because Moses would have been stuck doing the same thing day in and day out. He would have been stuck listening to case after case after case, and he would not have been able to tend to any of the people's other needs. He would have been burnt out and left the people with no one to help them at all. But Moses listened to Jethro. He had the humility to recognize and understand there were others capable of doing the work that he did, and he was willing to share the load. Moses was also willing to share something else. He was willing to share the authority. You see, it would have completely defeated the purpose of finding help if Moses would have brought these people on board and then sat in on everything they did. It would have defeated the purpose for him to micromanage every step. But instead, Moses gave them trust. Trust to make decisions they could, and trust that if they needed help, they would find it. Again, this was about humility. Moses humbled himself to not only seek out help, but to trust others and the gifts that God gave to them. He trusted that they would use their gifts to get the job done. Let's go back to Ecclesiastes for a sec. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls down and has no one to help them up. You know, so many times we refuse to ask for help because of pride. Our pride gets in the way. We don't want to seem like we can't handle things. We don't want to seem like we've failed. And at the same time, we're afraid of being left behind. You see, what if we ask for help and others forget? Does that just mean we're not worthy in their eyes? But at the end of the day, it's so much more detrimental to us not to ask for help because we need those people. We need those people to share in the labor. We need those people to be there to pick us up when we fall. We can't do it by ourselves, and quite frankly, we're not supposed to. God created us to be dependent on Him and dependent on others, to reach out for a helping hand and to accept that with grace and humility. So, when do we start asking for help? Right now, today. We start today, right now. And how do we do it? Well, first, we start by identifying, determining where we need help. It's true we don't need help in all areas. There's some things we're handling just fine. But there are other things we truly need help in. If one thing this pandemic has shown all of us, and one thing that we bring into our new, better normal, it's this: we can't do it all. Maybe it's your third grader's homework that you don't quite understand. Maybe it's getting those little tasks done around the house, like mowing the yard. Or maybe you need help getting the groceries, but you're just too afraid to ask. Where is it that you need help? What is it that you can do better with someone else? And what task, what burden can best be accomplished with someone else sharing the load? What is it that you need to let go of so that you can better serve the people God has placed in your life? Number 2, seek. You've got to determine who the right person to help. Moses wasn't a stranger in needing help or asking for it. Time and time again, he would go to God and he would ask for help. And when the time came, he willingly accepted the help of others. And he did it when Jethro suggested it, and together they sought out the best people to help him. And I want to point that out. They sought out the best people to help him. God has placed some amazing people in our lives, and he's gifted them with so many talents. There's a person that is right for each and every job. You're not going to ask your neighbor who's in a boot to help you mow your yard. Nor are you going to ask your best friend who failed high school math to help your teenager with their AP calculus homework. You're going to seek out and identify those people who are best suited for the job. Enlisting the help of others and delegating parts of large tasks is also a way that we honor them. We honor them by honoring their gifts. It offers trust in their abilities and recognizes the gifts they possess. Not everyone is going to be equipped for every single task, but you know what? Neither are you and I. Just like Moses had to find the right people to ask for help, it's important that you and I reach out and do the same. And the final thing to do is the most important, and it's also going to be the hardest. You have to ask. You have to make the request for help. And yeah, this is going to be the hardest step, but it's the most important one. You see, asking for help takes courage. So be courageous. Start today and then just keep going. Keep going together with God's help and with the people he has placed in your life. Lean into them and invite them to lean into you. Ask the hard questions and give honest answers. And above all, ask for help, because it's okay to ask for help. Joshua chapter 1, verse 9 says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Be strong and courageous. You know what? It's hard to ask for help. And so many times our fear of rejection or our fear of being considered someone who can't handle it keeps us from asking for the help. Last week, Leandra talked about control and how we have to give up control to rely on our faith. And when we ask for help, we do that. We let go of the control and we have faith in God and faith in the people he has placed in our lives to be our helpers. Here's the deal. When it comes down to it, we often find ourselves rebelling in our own independence and trying so hard to survive all on our own. But God's desire for his kids is to cover us with grace and help, his help and the help of others. He gives us his own compassion and provides us with a body of believers gifted to care for one another. And it's up to us to recognize and accept this truly as a gift. You see, it's a gift that we don't have to give in to isolation. It's a gift that we don't have to bear burdens, whether they be small or large, on our own. All we have to do to accept this gift is take the courageous, bold step to ask for help, to be brave and to be humble enough to trust that God has entrusted us with amazing people to help us. Those people that God gave us to bear the burdens and the joys with us and for us. You know, when Wolf was little, I prayed just to make it through the sleepless nights, through the toddler tantrums, through the terrible twos, and then there was some middle school angst when the hormones were going crazy and nothing I said or did was ever right. And then came high school. And my prayer was for time to slow down, for the last to take a little longer to achieve. I prayed for wise decisions, safe arrivals, mended hearts, and a future beyond anything he could imagine. I prayed for understanding and compromise, for kindness and courage. But all along the way, I prayed for people. People to help. People that would love him and believe in him. People who would give him a chance. People who would step in at a moment's notice without hesitation. People who would simply just show up. People who would not only point Wolf towards his future, but continually point him to the cross. And that prayer has been answered time and time again in so many ways by so many people. In about an hour, we'll gather with family and friends to celebrate. Yes, today's Mother's Day. But today, that takes a back seat, because today we celebrate Wolf. Today, he graduates from high school. Wolf will don his maroon cap and gown, and around his neck will be this cord. To the people on the outside, this cord is just a representation of his hard work at school. It's a representation of the good grades and the sleepless nights and the hard work he put in. It's a representation of all those AP classes his mom made him take. But to his father and I, to Wolf, and to the people who have been a part of his story, this cord represents so much more. This cord is a visual representation of all those people who have helped. It represents the family members, like his Nana and Granddad, who love him unconditionally, like his late Papa, who left behind a legacy of humility and service for Wolf to follow. It represents the doctors who jumped in when he was 2 years old, who did what seemed impossible. The doctors who allowed his father and I to celebrate this day with him. The doctors who relied on faith when science failed. It represents friends like Lisa, the Steelys, the Alberts, the Prices, and the Schwartzes, and so many more. These friends who've opened their hearts and their homes and loved Wolf as their own. It represents teachers like Sharon, Pat, and Becky, whose love, care, and guidance reach far beyond the classroom walls. It represents countless coaches over the years who showed up for Wolf not just on the field, but on the sidelines of life as well. This cord represents Chad and Craig, two people who put their faith in a high school kid, allowing him to take over tech and video projects for the church. People who not only told Wolf with their words, but showed Wolf with his actions that they cared about him, they trusted him, and they saw a future for him. And this cord represents you. It represents the church. It represents this place that you guys created for him. A place that he can always turn to. A community gathered to help him, no matter where he is and no matter how many times he stumbles. A community willing to stand up and stand with him and always point him back towards Christ. Ecclesiastes 4:12 says, "A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken." And this cord that Wolf wears around his neck today is a reminder of that. It's a reminder that we all need help, that we need other people. People to work beside us, people to lift our arms when we're tired, people to keep us warm, and people who continually lead us back to Christ when we lose our way.